Alright, this is Rudy. I went back and I'm making an introduction to my 1-hour video where I basically provide commentary from a fair use perspective for educational and commentary perspectives on the Jonathan Swartz Jen Fishburne interview. Now, I noticed in my timeline after the fact that my comment, and I'll have it up on the screen, but you see where it says 15 months from date 1 to date number 2? That actually should be date number 3. Okay, it's 15 months from January the 19th, 2007 to April of 2008. Okay, so even though it says date 1 to date 2, it should say date 1 to date 3. And the reason that 15 months is there is because the court held the trial transcripts from the Hovind family. When the Hovind family finally got the trial transcripts 15 months later in April of 2008, that's when they noticed that the judge's statement about worse than rape was missing, and then everyone that was in the courtroom started signing affidavits. Okay, that's why there's that 15 months delay. But I do have an error in my timeline, and it should be from date 1 to date number 3, not date 1 to date number 2. I did try to fix it in the beginning, but as the video goes on, you'll see that it reverts back to number 2. I simply can't correct it everywhere in the 1-hour video, but just remember it's date 1 to date number 3. Also, as a highlight to this 1-hour video, if you just want the highlights, I believe that Jen Fishburne is what's called a paid disinformation agent. I would like to ask her specifically if she's being paid anything, and I would like to ask her what proof does she have that she was in the courtroom, and how come we should believe her notes over sworn affidavits from 8 different people. Right? And how come Jonathan Swartz and Peter Riley and Deanna are so inclined to believe Jen Fishburne more so than people like Pastor Greg Dixon, Katie Rudolph, John Gusty, things like that, and also Kent Hovind's family members, who were actually, it's the same thing as if someone says, well, I did not see the car accident. Well, you've got 6 or 8 people who saw the car accident. That somebody that says they didn't see it, so what? It doesn't even matter. We don't even have proof that Jen Fishburne was in the actual courtroom. And also, her statement about the affidavits shows that she's not paying any attention whatsoever. And to solve this problem, all you have to do is you need a congressional investigation, and call the court reporter, which I believe is Gwen Kessinger, call the Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers, call Jen Fishburne. Matter of fact, if Jen Fishburne wants to go public and her motivation is simply to desire that the truth go out, why don't Jen Fishburne sign a sworn affidavit? Why don't she sign one? Because we already have one. We already have 8 of them back from April of 2008. So in any event, I just wanted to correct my timeline. I spent 1 hour going through this propaganda video, and if you're interested in these sorts of things, it's just interesting how the opposition to Kent Hovind, who I would like to ask every single one of them if they're getting a paycheck for their involvement in the Kent Hovind case, because there are those of us on the outside that are doing the best that we can, and we haven't been paid a dime. We're doing this because we do love the Lord and we love our brother, Pastor Kent Hovind, and we're not getting paid by the government to put forth any disinformation. The challenge that they have is they're being, I believe that some of them, maybe all of them, are getting paid, right, for their interest in the Kent Hovind situation, and therefore their motivations are completely unethical. And anyway, here's what I got to say about the Jen Fishburne interview, and I wanted to correct my error on the timeline. God bless. Okay, this is Rudy Davis. It's Friday, July the 31st, the year 2015. This is my response to the Jen Fishburne interview, highly edited Jen Fishburne interview, I should say. It will be a very long response. I plan on playing the entire interview and commenting on each point that's brought up. And at some point, I may make a shorter, condensed version just to highlight the points, because I know that the danger in making a long video like this is people will not watch it because it's so long, and they simply don't have the time nor the inclination to watch a long video like this. But I just want to go through it and capture all of my thoughts from start to finish, and then then I might make a condensed version at some point later. Let me also say before we get started that I did speak to Kent Hovind today, July 31st, and he told me that he absolutely stands by his statement that Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers, during his sentencing back in January the 19th of 2007, did state words to the effect that his crimes were worse than that of a rapist. And he is not backing off that statement one little bit. And so that has been Kent Hovind's consistent story. And the interview that was put out today by Jonathan Swartz and Peter Riley, who have consistently, throughout the entire Kent Hovind trial, Peter Riley and Jonathan Swartz have consistently tried to paint Kent Hovind in the most negative light possible. They'll claim that they're unbiased, but that absolutely is not the case. And I want to show you some major issues with Jen Fishburne and what she stated on this video. This video was given Memorial Day, which is May the 25th, so Jonathan Swartz has had this video for nearly 2 months now, June and July, right? So it's took him 2 months to come out with the video, I guess edit it and come out with it. And I'm responding the same day that it came out. It came out July the 31st. This is my response the same day. It doesn't take me 2 months to formulate a response. But there's some dates that I want you guys to be aware of in the timeline, because it's incredibly important that we have our timeline proper if you're interested in this particular issue. And it goes to the credibility of Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers, who incidentally is the same judge that's going to be sentencing our innocent brother Paul Hansen. So the first date to remember is January 19th, 2007. And I want to show you guys a document. This is the document right here. This is the sentencing transcript from Kent Hovind's trial back in January 19th of 2007. Now, I have a video where I read a speech that Judge Casey Rodgers gives, and it's the most horrific, biased, prejudiced, political, philosophical speech that's against Kent Hovind that you can possibly imagine. I suggest strongly that you listen to that speech because it tells you the judge's mindset. That speech was given on January the 19th, 2007, and it's also the same day that 8 people that signed an affidavit, as well as Kent Hovind, said that the judge claimed Kent Hovind's crimes were worse than that of a rapist. Worse than rape. Now that's the date that everyone that signed the affidavit said that she said worse than rape. Okay, now June the 29th is when Joe Hovind was sentenced. And this illegal criminal judge, with orders from higher up, also sent Kent Hovind's wife to prison. Her name is Jo Hovind, to prison as well. Okay, she went to prison for 1 year. Now this is also the date that Eric Hovind testified. Eric Hovind testified for his father, but he also testified for his mother. Now during the testimony of Eric Hovind for his mother, Eric Hovind refers to the fact that his father was called a rapist. Now, let's keep the dates in mind. January 19th, 2007, Kent Hovind was sentenced. June the 29th, 2007, Joe Hovind was sentenced. That was also the time that Eric Hovind testified. Let's go to that document. Let's go to the Joe Hovind sentencing document. Okay? That would be this document. June the 29th, 2007. What we're going to do is we're going to bring up our find, and we're going to look for the word rapist. There you go. Okay, and you'll see in the Joe Hovind sentencing transcript, I realized that this court considered my dad and what he did worse than a rapist. And that's okay. And then he goes on to, discuss how God controls the hearts of a king. The point is that the narrative the opposition camp would like you to believe is that all of this started based on a comment by Eric Hovind. And that is absolutely absurd. I have talked to Kent Hovind about that, and he also agrees it is absolutely absurd. And I've talked to Pastor Greg Dixon as well, and Pastor Greg Dixon has said that he heard the judge with his own ears say that Kent's crimes were worse than that of a rapist. And that occurred on January the 19th. Okay, so we got your 2 dates that we've covered so far. The date Kent Hovind was sentenced, January the 19th. The date that Joe Hovind was sentenced, June the 29th. That's also the date that Eric Hovind testified for his mother, and he referred to the fact that the court said that Kent's crimes were worse than a rapist during Joe Hovind's sentencing. Okay? The third date to remember, the date that the affidavits were signed. Okay?
This is people like Pastor Greg Dixon, people like Katie Rudolph, who was actually raped, people like John Gusty, people like Joe Hovind, Kent Hovind, Teresa Snyder. Let's go to that. Let's go to those affidavits. Now, these are those affidavits. And you say, when were these affidavits signed? Okay, it's incredibly important because Jen Fishburne is under the impression that the affidavits were signed 8 to 9 years later, and she talks about how professional and how meticulous she is, but she don't even know the dates that the affidavits were signed. Okay, this particular affidavit was signed by Teresa Snyder. Okay, she signed that affidavit, or Diane Hummel was the notary. She stamped it for, or she put her date 4/13. Okay, and the date on the top is April 13th of 2008. So April of 2008, incredibly important date. Let's look at the next affidavit. This one is by John Gusty. Okay, John Gusty said, I quote, "You are worse than a rapist," unquote. John Gusty, April of 2008. Okay, this one is Kent Hovind. Let me move my box here. Kent Hovind, April of 2008. I remember the day Dr. Kent Hovind was sentenced. Judge Rodgers said she was giving him 10 years for the crimes he was convicted of. I also remember her saying the crimes you are convicted of are worse than that of a rapist. Okay, you guys see that? I will never forget those words. They have echoed in my mind ever since that day. Okay, now that was Kent Hovind. That's Kent Hovind's son. You've also got, to whom it may concern, Katie Rudolph, who was actually raped, and she makes a statement, right, about Judge Rodgers announced that Kent Hovind had spent the next 10 years of his life in prison. She stated that his sentencing was harsh. He committed were worse than committing violent crimes such as murder and rape, and that was Katie Rudolph. Okay, what was the date of this letter? April of 2008. Okay, the affidavit of Joe Hovind. I distinctly remember the Judge Rodgers said, Mr. Hovind, I do consider what you have done to be worse than rape. I find that glaringly missing from the transcript. April of 2008, Joe Hovind. Okay, and then you have Greg Dixon. Greg Dixon writes in his letter, Dr. Hovind has been convicted, though only a misdemeanor, was worse than rape. Okay, that was Dr. Greg Dixon, and I interviewed him on a YouTube audio, and he actually confirmed his affidavit. The point I want to make from these affidavits is they were all taken in April of 2008. So let's go back to our timeline. Okay, we have, let me bring this down just a little bit. We have January 19th of 2007, Kent Hovind was sentenced. Okay, June the 29th, 2007, Joe Hovind was sentenced. Misspelled the word sentence there, didn't I? Okay, and then date number 3. The affidavits were signed in April of 2008. They were signed 15 months later. And you might ask yourself, why did it take 15 months for all these people to sign the affidavit? Okay, the reason it took 15 months for these people to sign an affidavit is because the court, which is very irregular, kept the trial transcripts for 15 months. Normally it just takes a couple months, maybe a month or so, just to send the trial transcripts. But they kept the trial transcripts for 15 months. And immediately when the trial transcripts came back and the Hovind family was able to review them, as well as other people that had attended the sentencing, right, they noticed that it was gone. It's like it took 15 months to get the trial transcripts, but immediately people said, wow, that statement that the judge made that Kent's crimes are worse than that of a rapist, they're missing from the trial transcripts, so they immediately signed affidavits. Sworn affidavits, right? All of those people, including Pastor Greg Dixon. Okay, that's why it took 15 months. But you'll hear in this interview with Jen Fishburne, it was something like 8 to 9 years later. And she claims to be so professional and a teacher, and she takes meticulous notes, and nobody else takes meticulous notes. Are you kidding me? She doesn't even have her timeline proper. She's the one coming out with an interview. What is it, 8 years later? She's the one doing an interview 8 years later. And let me ask you this. What does it matter that she doesn't remember something? You can say, well, I don't remember a car accident happening, but that doesn't tell the people that were in the car accident that it didn't happen. It absolutely did happen. They signed affidavits. Jen Fishburne hasn't signed an affidavit that it wasn't stated. And I'll tell you what, I think that Congress needs to have a congressional hearing, right? Congress needs to have a congressional hearing, and to settle this issue, why don't they have Judge Rodgers state that she did not claim that Kent's crimes were worse than rape, and she did not order the trial transcripts to be changed? And why don't we have Judge Rodgers brought up before a criminal investigation in Congress? And why don't we have the court reporter? Let's just find the court reporter's name real quick, because Jonathan Swartz talks about how honorable and ethical the court reporters are. Do we have that on here? Let's just see. Hopefully the court reporter signs her name to some of this stuff. Let's go down to the bottom. There we go. You want the court reporter's name? Her name is Gwen B. Kissinger, RPR, FCRR, official court reporter. Gwen B. Kissinger. Hey, Gwen, would you be willing to go before Congress and sign an affidavit that you were not ordered to change the trial transcripts? Would you be willing to go before Congress and to sign an affidavit and to testify that you did not change the trial transcripts and that you did not hear the judge say that Kent's crimes were worse than that of a rapist? Would Gwen, let's don't forget her name, Gwen B. Kissinger, okay? Now, I want to play for you the Jonathan Swartz video. I know it's very long. This is going to be a long video. But, you know, it's going to be, this is my response the same day they come out with it. Took them 2 months to edit it. Took them 2 months to come out with it. Took Jen Fishburne, how long did it take her? From 2007, took her from 2007 to 2015. Took her 8 years to come out with her testimony. It's going to take me 1 day to respond. All right. And then Peter Riley also has an article. Let me come out with that. I'll put the link. This is the article. Let me, here we go. Evidence that judge did not call Kent Hovind's crimes worse than rape. So Peter Riley is trying to help Judge Rodgers salvage her credibility. It's kind of a funny article. They have D. Holmes as if she's some expert. And she calls me, you know, all my blathering. And she uses the fact that I believe that the birth certificate is a proven forgery, which I would ask you to speak to Mara Zabest. She's a PDF expert, recognized world expert in the field of PDF files, Adobe Acrobat PDF files. Mara Zabest wrote a 10-page report that proves that Obama's birth certificate is a forgery, upside down and backwards. And then not only that, but Sheriff Arpaio was a little bit late to the game. But Sheriff Arpaio, which is one of America's most toughest and trusted sheriffs, he stated on the record that it's a forgery. And then she goes on to claim that I'm a geocentrist, and somehow that discredits me and everything else I say. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm sticking by my geocentricity, but I don't, you know, this is what's called when you attack somebody else's beliefs that aren't pertinent to the situation, and that we're going to discredit him on what he's saying here because he believes the earth doesn't move. Okay, you can do that all you want to, but I'll tell you what, one day, you know, I would say that in a proper ethical debating and a proper ethical way to approach things, Dee would not be referring to my geocentrism or my birtherism. She would be referring to the facts about this situation, but instead you can see how desperate she is to discredit me in trying to salvage the credibility of the judge. So anyway, I'll put the link to Peter Riley's article. He's always been trying to promote the worst possible light for Kent Hovind. And so here we go. Let's go to the Jen Fishburne interview. Let me bring this up here, and let's play.
So Jen, thank you for meeting with us tonight, and realize that you're revisiting Pensacola.
I'm actually just visiting some friends of my boyfriend's, Jeff. So we're just here for vacation, I guess, for a weekend.
Socializing and tourism.
Kind of, yes.
Okay, the important part here is I think Jen Fishburne has gone by several names on the internet. I've seen her put up blogs using other names than Jen Fishburne. I guess she wants to maintain some sort of anonymity, but she's not from Pensacola, right? That's the important point. I want you to make note that she said she's not from Pensacola, because I think that'll be important later on.
And you were last in Pensacola when?
Oh, probably 2 months ago. I drive through here on a pretty regular basis.
Okay. And I understand that you were an observer at the first Kent Hovind trial when he went up for tax charges.
Yes,
Is that correct?
just at the sentencing, not the whole trial.
Okay. What was your involvement?
Okay. She just claimed to be an observer at the sentencing, not the whole trial. Okay, so that would put her in the courtroom on January the 19th, 2007. That's important. She's claiming to be in the courtroom taking notes January the 19th, 2007. Okay, that's what she's claiming. Now, my question to Miss Jen Fishburne is, what evidence do you have that you were there? Do you have any sort of credit card records from that day that indicated you were in the area? You know, you claim to be in the courtroom, but how do we know? I'm just curious, you know, how do we know that you're not a paid disinformation agent and that you're not lying? You know, I'm not calling you a liar. I'm just saying, how do we know that you're not lying? Anybody can claim to be in the courtroom and taking notes. I'm kind of curious as we go through this interview if you'll give any hard evidence that you were actually in the courtroom.
Involvement with Creation Science Evangelism, with the ministry? Had you been interested in their teachings? Were you involved in homeschooling? Can you give us a little bit of the backstory?
Sure. I was a homeschool mom for 17 years and had, listened to some of Kent Hovind's teachings. And so I brought my kids down here to see Dinosaur Adventureland. And
When you say down here, where do you live?
in San Antonio. So we're from San Antonio, Texas. So we came to see Dinosaur Adventure.
Okay, I'm going to stop it. I don't mean to interrupt every single time here, but she's from San Antonio, Texas, right? Later on in the interview, she claims that she knows how many local people attended and how many people from out of town attended. But she doesn't, like, how would you know if you're in a crowd of people, like, how many people are local and how many people from out of town? I mean, the point is that she's not local. She's not from local Pensacola.
Adventureland, and I met Kent and his son Eric and a bunch of the people that worked here, and Kent spent a good deal of time with us that day, a couple hours or so, and got to know him a little bit, and so that was really what my knowledge of him before the trial.
And did your children enjoy the experience? Did they like him?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, she claims to have spent a couple of hours with Kent that day. That's an important fact.
Everything about it was really it was a wonderful day. We had a great time.
And what were some of the interesting things at Dinosaur Adventureland just because they're interesting? And what were some things that might have supported the creationist or young earth creationist argument, so to speak?
I'm not sure that we really saw anything that supported the young earth creationist viewpoint that stood out to me that day. It was more, the science experiments that kind of made things come to life, and just kind of a little bit of adventure in everything that they did. And there weren't very many people, so it was kind of one-on-one with the people who were working here in our family. And so it was more the interaction that stood out to us that day.
How many kids were you homeschooling, and were you homeschooling them at the same time?
Yes, I have 3 kids that I homeschooled almost all the way through. So
At the time, what church or denomination, etc., were you involved with? Around the time?
At that time, I went to Doug Phillips' church in a Bernie Christian Assembly in San Antonio, which Doug Phillips is well known in the homeschool movement.
Okay, Doug Phillips. Let's replay that again. I got to hear that again. Sorry.
Got it. And did you off?
In the homeschool movement. Doug Phillips' church in a Bernie Christian Assembly in San Antonio.
Doug Phillips' church in a burning Christian assembly in San Antonio, Texas. So I would like, let's go reach.
Doug Phillips as well.
Let's go reach out to Doug Phillips' church. If anybody's listening to this and wants to help, let's go reach out to Doug Phillips' church in San Antonio, Texas, and see if Jen Fishburne was on the membership of that church at that time. That should be easy to confirm. I hope it's not one of these situations where, like, Obama claims that the doctor who signed his birth certificate, just by the way, he happened to die. We can't go talk to the doctor anymore. So I don't know nothing about Doug Phillips with a burning Christian assembly in What did she say again? Hold on just a second.
It said, were you involved with around the time?
At that time, I went to Doug Phillips' church in a Bernie Christian Assembly in San Antonio.
Okay, a burning Christian assembly in San Antonio, Texas. So we should be able to confirm that. If anybody is listening to this and you want to help in investigative journalism, let's go talk to Doug Phillips, see if we can get his membership for his church back in 2007, and see if she's telling the truth. And I hope it's not one of these situations where, you know, Obama gives the doctor that was at his birth, and all of a sudden the doctor has, dead, and we can't talk to the doctor.
Which Doug Phillips is well known in the homeschool.
Got it. And do you often take field trips with your children?
All the time. So we would go traveling around the United States at least once a year and just do various things like that. But just locally we did as much as possible. It was a much better learning experience, I felt, for my children to do those kind of things.
Fantastic. So you attended the sentencing, and help us set the scene a little bit.
Okay, I got to play that again. She claims to be a teacher. What was the date again? Hold on. The date is January the 19th of 2007. Is school being held that time? I mean, is a teacher get off January 19th normally? I don't know. You guys can help me check that out. Let's listen to that just a little bit more. Hold on.
Fantastic.
Oh, she's a homeschooler. Okay. She's a homeschooler, so I guess she can have the freedom of travel. Good point, babe.
So you attended the sentencing, and help us set the scene a little bit. At his first trial, were there many people observing? Was it a federal courthouse? What judge was presiding? Because I attended the recent trial, as Abigail did, and Ben, who was one of our young journalists based here. We attended the whole trial, and it was very high tech and very kind of fast paced. And there were lots of federal marshals because of the, I think, large part because some of Kent Hovind's supporters are fairly exuberant and easy with their words and the veiled threats.
Okay, I got to stop it. Veiled threats. Okay, that's an important thing that he just said, veiled threats, because Jim Lott has been taking all of my videos regarding exposing this judge and sending them to U.S. Marshals. The U.S. Marshals came and visited me when I was in Pensacola and asked me for a private questioning session, and I refused to go with them unless it could be recorded, and they wouldn't allow it to be recorded. So these people, when I say these people, I'm talking about Jonathan Swartz, that Jim Lott guy, they're constantly trying to build the case that I'm threatening that judge. And the only reason I would be threatening that judge is because I'm telling the truth about her evil wickedness, that she's been lying, and all of the wickedness that she's done to put Kent Hovind, Joe Hovind, and keeping Paul Henson in prison. So keep that in mind. If I ever wind up being visited by a U.S. Marshal in the future, it's because of statements like Jonathan Swartz and Jim Lott, and I think they had a lot to do with Kent Hovind being sent to solitary confinement in Yazoo prison. But that's just my thoughts there.
What have you? So what was the scene back in, what year was it?
Well, it must have been 2000, oh goodness, I'm not sure, 2005. Well, this says 2007.
2007, okay. So you attended the sentencing in 2007, and what was the setting? And were your children with you at that time? Were you using this as a civics lesson?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My two youngest children were with me at that time. And, goodness, 2007, maybe they were 12 and 14 years old. And my youngest one kind of has the mind of a 2-year-old, so that was a little bit difficult situation. So she was wearing special hearing protection, so she kind of stood out in the courtroom. But I don't remember the judge's name. I believe it's the same judge who's been
Rodgers.
Yeah,
Right.
Rodgers. So the same one, and it was a federal.
Okay, that's very interesting that she says she doesn't remember the judge's name. This entire effort, from my perspective, right, this is me speculating, is Jonathan Swartz, Peter Riley, Jim Lott, Deanna Holmes, and some jerk that runs a Facebook page. They're trying to salvage the credibility of Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers. They've got to salvage her credibility because her name has been ruined by what she's done to Kent Hovind, and she can't get around it, right? She can't get around that speech that she gave. She can't get around the fact that she stacked the structuring charges. She gave Kent Hovind time for saying a prayer on a radio. There's no law that required him to withhold taxes from his ministry workers. They stole Dinosaur Adventureland. They made the family buy it back. They've terrorized the Hovind family, and Judge Rodgers is right at the tip of the spear for driving that terrorism. And yet, this entire effort by these people is to salvage Judge Rodgers' credibility. But it's interesting that Jen Fishburne, I don't remember the judge's name. That's interesting.
Courthouse then.
And was the courtroom?
It was packed. It was packed. It was just, standing room only.
This time in this trial, it was kind of quiet the first couple of days, and by the end of it, it was packed. But I would say vast majority from out of town. Hovind's ministry was fairly international or regional, so it makes some kind of sense. But you notice the fact that there didn't seem to be a lot of local supporters. And the first trial in 2007, did you have any sense of who was who and where they were from?
There were a lot of local people here.
Okay, I got to stop it. Okay, there were a lot of local people here. She's already admitted to coming from San Antonio, Texas. She's not from Pensacola, Florida. How does she know? Like, if you look into a courtroom full of standing room only people, my question to Jen Fishburne is, how do you make a determination that there's a lot of local people here as opposed to a lot of out-of-towners? I'm real curious. I'm real curious how you even prove that you were in the courtroom, Miss Jen Fishburne. What proof can you give that you were in the courtroom and you actually were there? Because I'm very concerned that you're a paid disinformation agent and that you were not there. Now, if you were there, you would have provided evidence to everybody on this video. I was at the courtroom January of 2007, and you would have showed us some evidence, but we're just supposed to take your word for it that you were there? Very interesting.
Of course, in his ministry, he employed a lot of local people, and then a lot of his family members, many of his family members were here as well in the first one. So, I can't say how many in comparison to this one, but there were a lot of local people here.
And in terms of out-of-towners, did you have any sense for how many of you were from out of town?
It didn't seem to be very many. I mean, I didn't take a poll or anything, but I didn't get the sense that there were too many from out of town.
So in some ways, it was a mere opposite
It
experience.
seems to be.
And was there heavy security?
No, I don't recall that at all.
So it was a different experience.
Okay, I got to make a comment on this heavy security. There was heavy security. You know why there's heavy security? Because the judge has been exposed for the lying, evil reprobate that she is, right? And so they have to protect the judge. But when they bring up the security issues, we've got all these dangerous, dangerous people like Kent Hovind supporters in the courtroom, homeschoolers, and people wearing long skirts, and people carrying Bibles. We got to have that. Maybe they have the heavy security because the judge has been exposed as an absolute evil, liar, wicked reprobate that she is, Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers.
What do you have on your computer screen?
Well, I recently wrote a couple letters to, one to Kent and one to Eric. And so I've got some of the exact quotes that were here that are part of the reason why I'm involved in this situation at this point in the game.
Okay, so we got to turn over some of the discourse to you. What's your involvement? And one other thing, I don't know why it's come up so often, but when you read the blogs and social media of the Free Kent Hovind supporters and movement, they often pull this quote. They say that the judge said, or the prosecutor, what Kent Hovind did was worse than a rapist. When you read the transcripts, Eric Hovind, very nice young man who I've talked to many times, he said they're treating my dad like a rapist. So I said, okay, well, that's where the phrase came from, and people kind of just got a little bit twisted. Did you hear Judge Rodgers say, or do you remember, Kent Kent Hovind's crime makes him worse than a rapist?
Well, that's actually the difference between me and everyone else who was in the courtroom that day. So even though it was a standing room only courtroom, I was the only one who was taking notes. None of the reporters were taking notes, none of the observers were taking notes. So I took notes, and I have a blog, so I actually wrote in very great detail what happened at the end of each day. And so,
And you're like,
Okay, you took notes. You're the only one taking notes, and you did it in great detail, but you don't know the judge's name. Okay, I'm not saying that you weren't there, Miss Jen Fishburne. I'm just saying I would like some proof that you were there, right? And how long have these blogs been around? Have they been around since 2007? Have the blogs actually been published since 2007? That would be a good question to have answered.
a teacher and a professional, and generally you trust your documentation trail?
absolutely, yeah.
Okay, I got it. She's a teacher, she's a professional, and she trusts her documentation trail. Okay, let me ask you something. If 6 to 8 people signed an affidavit and said that they heard something, and Jen Fishburne says, I was there and I didn't hear it, what does that prove exactly? It's like, I didn't see the car accident. Well, okay, well, there's 6 people who said they did see the car accident. So even if Miss Jen Fishburne was there, and she can provide evidence that she was there, even if all of that is true, the fact that she took detailed notes and is a professional, what is that? A slap in the face to Pastor Greg Dixon, who's been a pastor for decades? It's a slap in the face to all the other people who signed a sworn affidavit that they heard the judge say that. So it doesn't prove anything one way or the other. It's simply hearsay at this point, unless Miss Jen Fishburne wants to sign a sworn affidavit.
And I had conversed with someone who's very intimately acquainted with the case after each part of the trial as well, and just double checked with him to make sure that I had all my facts straight. So
Okay, so you checked every day with someone who's very intimately with the case to make sure your facts were straight. I'm curious who that is. Just curious, if you're going to be checking with somebody, maybe you could tell us that person's name at some point in time.
But basically, it's as you have said. So I have a couple of exact quotes here. Just, I think it's important that we have the words correct,
Okay.
because as far as I understand, Kent is currently saying that the judge accused him of being worse than a rapist.
Not sure whether it's so much him or his supporters, but in any case, that's we could say that he hasn't necessarily denied that. Whether or not he said that or someone else said that and attributed it to, there is, yeah, you could spend all your time keeping up with the Hovindicator blogosphere.
Right.
Fortunately, I have a full-time job and I'm a solo parent, but many times this thing, well, there were 8 affidavits of people that heard this, so on and so forth. So they're often referred to that 8 people who were there signed affidavits, which I've never seen, who swore to this.
Okay, wait. I love it how he says that. There were 8 people that signed affidavits, which I've never seen, right? He almost acts like, that we're making this up about the Here they are, Jonathan. This one's from Teresa Snyder, affidavit, right there. At the sentencing of Kent Hovind, I heard Judge Casey Rodgers state that Kent Hovind had done was as bad or worse than a rapist, right there, okay? I'm showing you the affidavits. We've made the file public for quite some time, and anybody can look at the affidavits, all right? Here they are. So when you say I haven't seen them, trying to discredit them as if they don't exist, we've made them public for quite some time, and I'm sorry that you haven't had the time to locate them. Let me also say that Kent Hovind, I talked to him this morning, and he stands by his statement that that judge absolutely said that words to the effect that his crimes were worse than rape.
Right. And so those 8 affidavits, as far as I'm aware, were all sworn statements that were done 8 to 9 years after the fact.
Whoa! Okay, I'm getting a little excited here, folks. Those affidavits, as far as I'm aware, were done 8 to 9 years later. So Jonathan did a video to discredit the Worston rape. He's never even seen the affidavits. He didn't even bother to go look for the affidavits. This lady, we don't even know if she was there, is saying they were signed 8 to 9 years later, and I've got the affidavits, and they were signed 15 months later. You know why it took 15 months? It took 15 months because they held the trial transcripts away from the Hovind family for 15 months, and they signed the affidavits as soon as the trial transcripts came in. Do you see how absurd this interview is? And then Peter Riley takes this interview from Jonathan, who just said he's never saw the affidavits. The lady, we don't even know if she was there. She thinks the affidavits were signed 8 to 9 years later, which is a complete, absurd that she thinks they're signed 8 to 9 years later. And then you got Peter Riley writing an article about it, giving it credibility. Evidence that the judge did not call Kent Hovind's crimes worse than rape. My goodness, wow. Talk about jumping the gun and yellow journalism and biased journalism. My goodness, what kind of truth seekers we got going on here?
And whereas my documentation was done.
I got to play that one part again. That one part where she says 8 to 9 years. Listen to that very carefully, folks.
Who swore to this?
Right. And so those 8 affidavits, as far as I'm aware, were all sworn statements that were done 8 to 9 years after the fact.
No.
And whereas my documentation was done the day it happened.
Oh, I see.
And so that's what makes mine different.
Oh, I see.
The others that are
well, that's an outright lie. What you just said, Miss Jen Fishburne. Will we be getting an apology? Will we be getting a correction for this interview? I'm just curious.
As a journalist and a filmmaker who has trouble remembering what story he worked on the week before, I would say probably it sounds like we are inclined to believe the accuracy of your documentation.
Well, I'm hoping so, and that's why I'm...
Okay, we're inclined to believe the accuracy of your documentation over the people that signed sworn affidavits 15 months, which immediately came in after the trial transcript arrived. Incredible. Absolutely incredible, the mentality of these sorts of people.
Coming forward and speaking out.
Right. Okay, so let's hear what your notes say.
Okay, well, I just basically I wrote a couple letters, one to Eric and one to Kent. They are similar, but not exactly the same. And, just reminded them of how I met them. They both remembered me. They both wrote back. They both remembered me. And so here's the part that I think is... Okay,
wow. They both remembered me. Just because somebody responds to your email doesn't mean they remember you, Miss Fishburne. I respond to lots of emails to people that I've never met. So when you say they both remembered me, you need to come up with evidence to back up that statement. Man, this whole thing is nothing but, it's propaganda of the highest degree. They both remembered me. Well, let's talk to Kent Hovind and to Eric Hovind and ask them whether they remembered you or not. But you just saying they both remembered me, that certainly gives you some sort of leverage to promote your credibility, doesn't it? It really does. But I don't know if that's true. Matter of fact, I would be very doubtful if Kent Hovind remembers you whatsoever.
And his letters were written when?
January 28th of this year. So I just pulled out the quote from the transcript here where the judge says, I received letters from many of you, and at this point she's speaking to everyone who's in the audience, just the people who came to observe like me. I received letters from many of you expressing the view that sometimes those convicted of heinous crimes are subject to less time than Mr. Hovind is facing in this case. This is a serious case, serious charges, serious conduct. Make no mistake about it. By your conduct in this case, Mr. Hovind, in my opinion, you dishonored the men and the women in our military, you dishonored your fellow Americans, and you've dishonored the Constitution of the United States. And that is the only thing that she said regarding this particular section about heinous crime.
No. That's not the only thing that she said. My goodness, that's certainly not the only thing that she said. I made a video and I read for a good 10 to 15 minutes of everything that she said. And I highly recommend that anybody watching this go listen to what Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers said when she sentenced Kent Hovind, because it was a lot more than just those few sentences that Jen Fishburne just read. It's a lot more. you've got to listen to the speech because it'll tell you the wicked mindset of Judge Rodgers.
And that was in regard to Kent Hovind's sentencing. And Eric that day had stood up and was a character witness for his father. And then the next day was Joe's sentencing, and Eric again stood up as a character.
Okay, wait. Let's play that again. This whole interview is so full of just mistakes and misinformation.
That was in regard to Kent Hovind's sentencing. And Eric that day had stood up and was a character witness for his father. And then the next day was Joe's sentencing.
Okay, the next day was Joe's sentencing. Now, here's the dates that I have right here. I have date number 1, January 19th, Kent Hovind sentenced. Date number 2, Joe Hovind sentenced. And to prove that, now I could be wrong. I would like for somebody to correct me. But I have the Kent Hovind sentencing transcript right here. Transcript of sentencing proceedings before the Honorable M. Casey Rodgers. And that date is January 2017. Now, if you listen to Miss Jen Fishburne, Joe Hovind would have been sentenced on January the 20th, right? That's if you listen to her, it would have been 1 day later. But when you look at the date on Joe Hovind's sentencing, transcript of sentencing proceedings before the Honorable, my goodness, I hate to even say that word, Honorable M. Casey Rodgers. And it's the same court reporter, by the way, Gwen B. Kissinger. We have the sentencing transcript for Joe Hovind, right? Joe Hovind, it certainly wasn't the next day. It was June the 29th. It was a few months later. So, somebody's going to have to explain that to me about Jen Fishburne claiming the next day Joe Hovind was sentenced, because that does not appear to be the case from looking at the sentencing transcripts.
Eric again stood up as a character witness for his mother. And when he stood up for Joe Hovind, his mother, he said that he reminded the judge that it had been his honor to speak on his father's behalf at his trial, but that he considered this occasion to speak on behalf of his mother to be 10 times that honor. Justice has to be blind, Eric stated, as he agreed with the judge sentencing his father to a sentence worse than that of a rapist. He said that this whole trial was really meant for Kent to be made the example of, and that Joe didn't need to be used in that same way. So Kent was the only one who ever used the word rapist, and he...
Sorry, you mean Eric?
I'm sorry, Eric was the only one who ever used the word rapist. The judge did not.
Okay, wow, okay, hold on. Let's go back to our timeline. We got January the 19th, Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers said worse than rapist. Now, they kept the trial transcripts for 15 months. June the 29th, we have Joe Hovind, right? The trial transcripts for Joe Hovind. Now, if I search this document for the word rapist, let me find it. Find next. There we go. This is what she's referring to. I realized that this court considered my dad and what he did worse than a rapist. Right there. Okay? Now, that's Eric Hovind speaking on June the 29th. That's what's that, 6 months later? Now, he's referring to the fact of what they said in January. On January the 19th of 2007. Keep in mind, they didn't know that it was removed from the trial transcripts until April of 2008 because they kept the trial transcripts. Right? And so there's no way that they could have known that the judge had modified the trial transcripts. So she's got some serious problems with her story here.
She did mention that it was that those convicted of a heinous crime are sometimes subject to less time than Kent Hovind would be. But that's all that she had to say with it. So it was all in conjunction with the sentencing and the time of how much. At no time did anyone in the trial ever call Kent worse than a rapist.
So,
okay, Jen, I want you to remember that statement, and next time I want you to possibly look at the camera. At no time. Let's just hear that again. Let's hear that one more time.
Would be, but that's all that she had to say with it. So it was all in conjunction with the sentencing and the time of how much. At no time did anyone in the trial ever call Kent worse than a rapist.
Okay, Jen, I want you to put that in a signed affidavit. A signed sworn affidavit. Let's have a congressional hearing. Let's get Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers. Let's get Gwen B. Kissinger, and let's get you, and y'all can sign affidavits like Pastor Greg Dixon, Katie Rudolph, John Gusty. How about we do that? Are you going to sign a sworn affidavit too?
So, why did this? What's your thought about how these words got twisted around and circulated, and why this affidavit was signed? Do you think it was a genuine misunderstanding that the years had clouded? Do you think folks knew what had been said, and this was a rhetorical point which they were using to try to spring their leader?
Well, that's not something that I really know. So, I can't say what was in someone else's mind on what happened here. I don't know. I know that when he saw the transcripts, Kent said that's not what he remembered. That's when the story started going from there. But I don't know what was in anyone's mind.
So you remember Kent Hovind himself saying that the transcripts were off, as opposed to his minions?
He said that, in
As opposed to his minions. I love your choice of words, Jonathan. Hey, his minions, and you call him our leader, right? Hey, my leader is Jesus Christ. Ken Hovind is a brother in Christ, and you can call me a minion all you want to, but just remember when words get a little loose in the future, let's remember your words as well.
one of his YouTube video things that they do the prison call, to his friend, and then they put it on YouTube.
Rudy Davis and Kent Hovind.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you recall about what Kent Hovind had said regarding this during that call?
That's when he said that he accused the judge of calling him worse than a rapist. So.
And do you think
I love the pause for dramatic effect. I just love the pause. You guys are really good. You guys are really, really good actors.
misremembered?
I hope so. But I really don't know. I can't speak to what.
So can we leave it at that's the kinder interpretation? Okay. Any other insight that you have on the Hovind case and any of your feelings, on what's happened, to the extent that you followed it with the retrial and now his acquittal? Right.
Well, I sent the two letters, one to Eric and one to Kent, and they both sent me a letter back. And so Kent sent me a letter back saying that his only goal was for the truth to be known. And so I hope that is seriously what is happening, and that's really why I'm here today. Because my goal is that the truth be known.
Did you hear back from?
Okay, it's highly edited. You guys see the change in the cut, right? This whole video is highly edited, and you can tell they cut away after various things that she says. I don't know what she said in between. Here, the deal is she only wants the truth to be known. So you got this lady from San Antonio, Texas, and she has such a burden in her heart that the truth be known, and she's going to come out and do this interview, and she's so concerned about this statement that was backed up by sworn affidavits, right? And she just now only wants the truth to be known. Wow, she's got her priorities straight, right? I mean, Kent Hovind spent 9 years in prison. Paul Hansen has spent nearly a year in prison. But Jen Fishburne is concerned about just let the truth be known. Wow, she's so noble. Just a very, very noble lady we have here.
Eric.
Yes, I did. So Eric agreed that nothing had been tampered with in the transcript, and he agreed with my statements of what had happened with the two character statements that he had.
Wow, she's speaking on behalf of Eric. I haven't talked to Eric. I don't know what Eric has to say or not to say, but wow. Okay, maybe someone should interview Eric. Maybe somebody, instead of taking Jen Fishburne's word for what Eric believes and what Eric doesn't believe, or what Eric has said and what Eric hadn't said.
About both of his parents, and that he was the one who said that the sentencing was worse than that of a rapist, but that the judge had never said that Kent was worse than a rapist. And so he was concerned about the whole situation with what was happening.
I don't know. Look, I'm not going to speak for Eric Hovind, but Kent Andrew Hovind, which is Kent's other son, signed an affidavit, a sworn affidavit, Right, let's just go to that real quick. Let's go to that real quick. There you go, that's it. You guys see that? This is Kent Andrew Hovind. To whom it may concern, I remember the day Dr. Hovind was sentenced. Judge Rodgers said that she was giving him 10 years for crimes he was convicted of. I also remember her saying crimes are convicted of worse than a rapist. I will never forget those words. They have echoed in my mind ever since that day. Kent Andrew Hovind, that's Kent's other son. Now, if let's just, I haven't talked to Eric Hovind, and I would never presume to speak for Eric Hovind like you are, Ms. Fishburne, in your noble quest for truth. But maybe Eric Hovind needs to speak for himself as opposed to you relaying what Eric Hovind believes and doesn't believe.
So, are you concerned about the response of some of the more colorful characters in the Free Kent Hovind movement to this this claim that you're making, which is just in line with the court transcripts, and I know court reporters, and I know their level of professionalism.
Right.
And can
I know court reporters, and I know their level of professionalism. Like the professionalism that I witnessed when I went to Kent Hovind's trial in Pensacola, Florida, where they wouldn't let you open a Bible, where they wouldn't let you take notes. Well, isn't it amazing that Judge Rodgers lets Jen Fishburne take notes when she went to the trial in 2007? But when we come back to the trial, there's heavy security with heavy U.S. Marshals, and nobody can take notes. Nobody can open up a Bible. Absolutely, and they're blaming it on, those terrorist Kent Hovind supporters. But maybe when they get caught lying, like Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers gets caught lying, maybe there's a public backlash. Have you ever thought of that? And now it's just absolutely absurd. This interview is like absurdity from beginning to end.
imagine, I mean, it's just one of these obvious things, but if you're coming out with this, somewhat publicly, do you expect to have some sort of censor from the Free Kent Hovind movement folks, or do you think they're basically, fairly jubilant? All the charges have been dismissed, and as far as we know, Kent Hovind will be a free man on August 9th of 2015, and then serve his probation, and chances are he will be allowed to travel and continue to evangelize on the creation front as long as he has permission from his probation officer. So, what do you have any concerns? Are you what would you say to someone who might bring this issue up again?
I don't have any concerns personally for myself, but I understand the legal system and the justice system, and having been involved in it in many different areas, and I know that if other charges come up and there are sworn statements that are brought to court that are found to be false, then those people can really be facing serious charges. So I would just be very, very careful about ever making a sworn statement unless you're 100% true, 100% sure of what it is. Making a sworn statement, 8 to 9 years later after something has happened is not usually a very wise idea.
Okay, there we go again. A sworn statement 8 to 9 years later. The sworn statement was given 15 months later in April of 2008, yet you keep promoting this false narrative that the sworn statements were given 8 to 9 years later. Ms. Jen Fishburne, you are absolutely off your rocker. You're way off base. You're completely promoting a false narrative. My question to you, ma'am, is are you getting paid money? Are you getting paid money, or you just have a noble desire in your heart to see the truth spoken? And now you talk about veiled threats. People have accused me of veiled threats, and I've been visited by U.S. Marshals. I've been visited by the Secret Service. The IRS has sent me a tax bill that was absolutely erroneous. Secret Service has came to my front door. But now we have Jen Fishburne putting out a veiled threat to anybody who signed those affidavits. Let's hear that again in case you missed it. Let's just go back just a little bit.
Are sworn statements that are brought to court that are found to be false, then those people can really be facing serious charges. So I would just be very, very careful about ever making a sworn statement unless you're 100% true, 100% sure of what it is. Making a sworn statement, 8 to 9 years later after something has happened is not usually a very wise idea.
Yeah, it's not usually a very wise idea to promote falsehoods, and God Almighty sees every single thing that we do.
So you think there's the conceivable possibility that there's some exposure there?
Mhm.
Any other wisdom or comments on either Kent Hovind, his ministry, or the Free Kent Hovind movement, or the second trial? Anything else you want to share with us?
I don't think so. You know, I hope that that this has been a situation where Kent has grown in his walk with the Lord during his time in prison. I hope it's changed him for the better, as I would hope that of anyone, you know, in that kind of a situation. And I hope that he uses the situation to, whatever goes on, to make wise choices and, you know, and lead, I guess, to do whatever God calls him to do in ministry and in a wise way.
Last question. To the extent that you followed some of the other writings or videos or audio broadcasts of the Free Kent Hovind movement, in researching this one or seeing it get blown up, and having been involved in other, as you say, legal and religious causes and events, do you have any general feelings about the Free Kent Hovind movement and how it was expressed, at least on the internet, and whether that was productive or counterproductive?
I did not follow it really to very much of a great degree at all. You know, at 10 years ago, I followed everything that was happening, but now, you know, I'm kind of in a different stage in my life. And so I have not followed very much of it at all.
And was your interest...
Okay, I got it. Let's put this in perspective. This Jen Fishburne claims to be from San Antonio, Texas. She claims to have been in the courtroom. She claims to have kept detailed blogs from the first court experience sentencing date in 2007. She's motivated by her noble goal of just wants the truth to get out there. She claims to have written these letters to Eric Hovind and Kent Hovind, but yet when she just wants the noble goal of the truth getting out there, she can't even, like, she doesn't even know about the affidavits and when they were signed. She keeps saying 8 to 9 years later. She doesn't even know the name of the judge, right? She doesn't even know that Joe Hovind's sentencing was several months later, not the next day, right? And so if she has a noble goal of just wants the truth to get out, she's sorrowfully and woefully lacking in her facts. And it's just absolutely amazing that Jonathan takes this and puts it out there, and Peter Riley jumps all over it, sends it out with some commentary by Deanna, and brings up my birtherism and my geocentrism, and to try to wash away this whole worse than rape statement made by Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers. But Jen Fishburne is not going to be enough to wash away that statement. Judge Rodgers made that statement, and she's going to be held accountable, and we're not going to let it slide.
Years ago, because you had a very good experience at Dinosaur Adventure Land. Mm-hmm. You had a positive impact on your kids.
Mm-hmm.
And
Ken was genuinely likable, and just you could tell that he really took an interest in us, and it wasn't putting on a front or anything, which you get from some ministry people. And, he just really genuinely took an interest in us and our family, and so that's what my interest was at that point.
So kindness begets kindness.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, John.
And enjoy the rest of your Memorial Day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
You too.
Bye.
All right. Kindness begets kindness. That's very good. Kindness begets kindness. I love that, Jonathan. Hey, what does sticking somebody 10 years in prison for no reason, what does that beget? I'm just curious. The best way to answer this, folks, and I know I'm a little animated, and I'm not, the most pleasant speaker to listen to all the time, but the best way to get to the bottom of this is let's have a congressional hearing. Let's have the court reporter, Gwen B. Kissinger. What's her name again? Let's go. She's at the bottom, right? There you go. Let's have Gwen B. Kissinger. Let's have the court reporter subpoenaed before Congress. Let's have Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers subpoenaed before Congress. Let's have Jen Fishburne subpoenaed before Congress. Let's have Kent Hovind, Eric Hovind, Ken Andrew Hovind. Let's have Pastor Greg Dixon, John Gusty, Katie Rudolph, and let's just get to the bottom of it. How about we do that? And are we going to believe the notes of this lady, Jen Fishburne, who can't even seem to get her timeline straight and some of her basic facts straight, doesn't even recall the name of the judge, and yet she says, I'm motivated by the noble cause of just getting the truth out. Okay? And we know the track record of Peter Riley and Deanna Holmes, right? We know the track record of those folks. You know, I would like to ask all these people that are in the opposition camp, I would like to ask them if they get paid, right? I would like to ask Jim Lott, Beatty, Deanna, Riley. I'd like to ask them if they get paid for their involvement in the Kent Hovind trial. And I asked that question to Beatty, and he refused to answer it. But I'd like to ask Jonathan that question too. But anyway, look, this is my response to this absurd interview. Absolutely absurd. And Jen Fishburne, I strongly suggest you watch this video, and I hope you do watch it. And I hope you give us your response. I have some very serious questions for you during the course of this 1 hour commentary. And if I find your blog or whatever, how to communicate with you, I hope someone sends it to you, because I think you got some serious holes in the interview, this highly edited interview that you did with Jonathan Swartz on Memorial Day. And regardless of anybody's attempt to salvage the credibility of Judge Margaret Casey Rodgers, who still has Paul Hansen in prison, you can't salvage her credibility. It's absolutely ruined, and it should be ruined for what she's done to Kent Hovind and his family and what she's doing right now to Paul Hansen.